She didn't know what it meant at first, but now she saw it clearly. It was the key. The one thing that would expose Victor's entire operation. With trembling hands, she tore the envelope open, her eyes scanning the document inside. Her breath caught in her throat as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. The name on the paper. The name she had never expected to see. Her father's name. Her father, who had disappeared years ago under mysterious circumstances. The man who had been involved in something far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. The man who had been working with Victor and the rest of them all along. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at Victor, her eyes wide with realization. You knew, she whispered, her voice shaking. You knew who I was all along. You knew I'd be the one to figure it out. Victor's expression remained cold, his face unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something dark, something triumphant. You were always meant to find out, Sarah. That's the beauty of it. You've been playing your part perfectly. And just as she thought she understood the full scope of the plan, the final twist hit her like a wave, crashing over everything she thought she knew. A loud click echoed in the room, and Sarah's stomach dropped. She turned to see Tom, standing in the doorway, his face expressionless, a gun in his hand. The betrayal was too much. Her mind couldn't process it. Tom, the one person who had been there for her, the one she had trusted more than anyone. He wasn't just part of this, it was all part of his plan, too. You didn't think I was going to let you ruin everything, did you? Tom's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. This is bigger than both of us. And now, it's over. The world tilted again, and in that final, horrific moment, Sarah understood the full depth of the conspiracy. She had been a pawn in a game she never even knew was being played. And now, there was no way out. The question wasn't whether she would survive this, it was how much of herself she would have to sacrifice to stop them all. Sarah's breath was shallow as she stood in the aftermath of everything that had happened, her mind racing to process the impossible reality unfolding before her. The gun that Tom had aimed at her moments ago was now lying discarded on the ground, its threat hanging in the air like an oppressive weight. She could feel her pulse thudding in her temples, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but the noise of her thoughts, the relentless questions, the betrayals, the crushing weight of the truth, was louder than anything. She had barely managed to escape with her life. The fight, the chase, the endless running had all come to a head. It had been a battle of wills, of trust, of survival. But now, in the eerie silence that followed the confrontation, Sarah was left alone with the wreckage of everything she had known, everything she thought she could trust. She had fought for answers, for justice, but the cost had been far higher than she ever imagined. Victor was gone, his empire crumbling as the evidence she had uncovered slowly made its way to the authorities. Tom, her once trusted ally, had vanished into the shadows, his face a distant memory. The web of lies and deceit that had entangled her life was slowly unraveling, piece by piece, as she stood amidst the ruins. The police had arrived too late, but they had enough now to piece together the puzzle. But that didn't stop the questions from haunting her. What had driven Tom to betray her? What was her father's true role in all of this? Was there anyone left who could be trusted? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what had this all been for? As Sarah made her way out of the dimly lit warehouse where everything had taken place, the cool night air hit her face, grounding her for the first time in what felt like forever. The city around her buzzed with life, oblivious to the war she had fought just blocks away. She couldn't help but feel a disconnect, like she was looking at the world through a glass wall, separated from everything she had once known. The night was quiet now, but in her mind, it was anything but. She had seen too much. She had learned too much. There was no going back to the way things had been. The realization hit her, everything in her life had changed. She had lost friends, family, pieces of herself. But she had also found something. Strength. Truth. A sense of closure, even if it wasn't the kind she had imagined. She knew there was a part of her that would never be the same. That night would always be with her, the faces of those she had trusted, their lies, their manipulation. But there was something else too, something that kept gnawing at her mind. That final conversation with Tom echoed in her thoughts. "It's over," he had said. And maybe, in a sense, it was. But part of her refused to believe it. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The conspiracy she had uncovered was just the surface, and there were still dark corners of the truth left to explore. Who else was out there? What else had been hidden? As Sarah stood there, gazing out at the city, she felt the weight of the truth she had uncovered. It was heavy, but it was also freeing. She had faced the darkest parts of herself and the world, and now she was standing on the other side. The path ahead wasn't clear, and there was still so much left unanswered, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of something close to peace. Her life wouldn't ever be simple again, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was better this way. Because she knew, deep down, that the answers were never as important as the questions. The journey itself had changed her in ways she could never fully explain. But just as she turned to leave, the faintest whisper of a sound caught her attention, soft, almost imperceptible. It came from behind her, from the shadows of the alley where the streetlights didn't quite reach. A figure stepped forward, their face obscured by the darkness, but Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to see their face to know who it was. The familiar silhouette, the unmistakable presence, it could only be one person. And in that moment, her blood ran cold. There, standing just feet away, was someone who shouldn't have been alive. Someone she thought she'd left behind. It was Jacob. His eyes met hers, full of meaning, full of secrets. "You thought it was over," he said, his voice low, but there was a trace of something else in it, something she couldn't quite place. "But it's not." Sarah's stomach twisted in a knot. Her mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. The world seemed to tilt, the ground beneath her feet suddenly unstable as she tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. Was this another game? Another layer of deception? Had she really uncovered the truth, or was there more, something darker and deeper than she had ever imagined? As the last of the streetlights flickered above her, Sarah stood there, caught in the moment between everything she had known and everything she would never understand. She had uncovered so many secrets, but now she realized there were more left in the shadows. And as Jacob stepped forward, his face still hidden, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over. It would never truly be over. And as the credits rolled, the audience was left with a chilling thought. Sometimes, the darkest truths are the ones we're never meant to find. Have you ever been walking through a park, lost in your own thoughts, and suddenly you hear someone crying? A stranger, sitting alone, their tears echoing the raw, unspoken pain that no one sees. The kind of pain that you know, deep down, is too personal to ever share. But what if, in that moment, something unexpected happened? What if the words of a complete stranger had the power to change everything for them, and for you? That's exactly what happened to Sarah. She had no idea that her life, the life she thought was lost in the chaos, was about to be pulled back from the edge, all because of a few words spoken by someone she had never met. But here's the twist. Those words weren't just a simple act of kindness or random advice. They were the catalyst to something deeper, something that would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew about herself, about people, and about life. And the craziest part? It wasn't just Sarah who was affected. It was you, the one watching this video right now, because what Sarah learned that day in the park is something that you might need to hear too. That's right, you are going to discover something today that might just change how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you interact with the people around you. Stick with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why that one moment, those few words, are more powerful than you could ever imagine. I know you clicked on this video because something in the title resonated with you. Maybe you've been there before, feeling lost, hopeless, or just stuck in a moment that seems impossible to get out of. Or maybe you just know someone who is, and you're hoping to find that key to unlock their heart or your own. Either way, I promise you this, there's a lesson here that's going to hit you hard. Now, before we get into the details of that incredible encounter, let me tell you a bit about Sarah. Sarah was just like so many of us, caught in the whirlwind of daily life, trying to keep up with everything: work, family, personal goals, the constant grind that leaves you wondering if it's all worth it. She was the kind of person who gave the world her best smile, always pushing through, even when her world was falling apart. But deep down, there was a void, a gnawing emptiness that no one saw. She was the type of person who kept everything inside, believing that if she showed weakness, the world would swallow her whole. That is, until one fateful afternoon when she found herself sitting on a park bench, tears rolling down her cheeks, unable to keep up the facade any longer. It was then that the stranger appeared. The man was older, unremarkable in many ways, but there was something about his presence that seemed to radiate warmth. He sat down beside her without asking, a simple gesture that felt like an invitation to trust. But Sarah, ever the skeptic, had no intention of sharing her pain with this stranger. She was used to handling things on her own. But the man, without saying much at first, simply sat there, waiting. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. His presence, his quiet patience, seemed to break through the walls she had built around herself. And when he finally spoke, Sarah's world shifted. He didn't offer advice or empty platitudes. He didn't tell her to just think positive or everything will get better. No, his words were different. They were honest. They were real. They were the kind of words you didn't expect to hear from someone who had no reason to care about you. The kind of words that made Sarah feel seen, understood, for the first time in years. But what he said, and the profound impact it had on her, is something you'll have to hear for yourself. Because the truth is, those words weren't just a moment of comfort, they were the beginning of something far greater. And here's where you come in. Have you ever had a moment where someone said something to you, and it completely shifted your perspective? Maybe it was a stranger, or a friend, or even someone you barely knew, but their words had the power to change everything. That's the mystery we're unraveling today. What is it about the right words at the right time that can unlock something inside us? Why do some conversations change the course of our lives while others fall flat? And what can we learn from Sarah's experience that could help us navigate our own struggles? I know, right now, you're probably sitting there thinking, what did he say? What was it that changed everything for Sarah? And I get it. You're probably feeling that curiosity bubbling inside you, wondering how this story unfolds. But I'm not going to give you the answer just yet. Because the truth is, the journey to understanding that moment is just as important as the words themselves. There's a deeper lesson here, and you won't want to miss it. So, stay with me. Let's dig into Sarah's story, piece by piece, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll walk away with something that can truly change your perspective. Maybe you'll see the world differently. Maybe you'll see yourself differently. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is listen and let someone's words reach us in ways we never expected. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Keep watching to see how the story unfolds, how Sarah finds the courage to face what's inside, and what she discovers that could very well change the way you think about life itself. The answer you've been searching for is just around the corner. Two halves. Sarah had never expected her life to spiral into this kind of chaos. She wasn't the kind of person who openly admitted when things were falling apart. If you asked anyone who knew her, they'd probably tell you she was doing just fine. She was always the one who made sure everyone else was taken care of, whether it was her friends, her colleagues, or even her family. But inside, something had been unraveling for months. She'd been pushing herself to the limit, juggling a demanding job in marketing, taking care of her aging parents, trying to keep up with a social life that was slipping through her fingers, and pretending that everything was under control. But the cracks were starting to show. And no one knew. Not even Sarah herself could fully understand what had triggered it, but one day, it hit her all at once. The weight of everything, the constant pressure, the loneliness masked by busyness, the creeping sense that she was running on fumes had become too much to bear. That's when she found herself sitting on that park bench, the tears flowing freely, her emotions raw and exposed in a way she hadn't allowed them to be in years. It wasn't just that Sarah was overwhelmed, it was deeper than that. There was something else gnawing at her, something that had been building in the background for months. She had recently ended a long-term relationship with someone who had once been her everything. Jacob had been her high school sweetheart, and their relationship had always felt like it was meant to last. But somewhere along the way, they'd drifted apart. They both tried to make it work, but it was clear that something was missing. And when Jacob had told her he needed space to figure things out, it had shattered her more than she was willing to admit. At first, she told herself it was for the best, that they both needed to grow, to find themselves. But deep down, A part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she had been replaced. That she was just a chapter in his story that he was ready to close. He hadn't even asked for her thoughts on the matter. It was as if she had no say in the ending. That rejection had planted seeds of self-doubt in her mind, and no matter how hard she tried to bury them, they kept sprouting up at the most inconvenient times. But that wasn't the only thing that had been eating away at her. The constant pressure at work was starting to weigh her down too. Sarah had been climbing the corporate ladder steadily for years. She was good at what she did, brilliant, even. Her creativity was unparalleled, and her attention to detail was what had gotten her so far. But lately, she'd felt like she was losing her edge. Deadlines were tighter, expectations higher, and her boss, who had always been supportive, seemed to be more distant. She'd been given a huge new project, something that could make or break her career, and instead of feeling excitement, she felt anxiety creeping up every day. It was like she was living in a constant state of hypervigilance, afraid of making a mistake that would be her downfall. And yet, when she looked around at her co-workers, they seemed so much more at ease. They had their own struggles, sure, but there was something about Sarah's anxiety that felt different. It was suffocating, all-consuming. In the midst of all this, she still hadn't fully processed the loss of her old friendships. She'd started noticing that her circle had gotten smaller. Her friends, those people who used to text her every day or invite her out for brunch, seemed to be moving on without her. She wasn't sure when the distance started, but one by one, those bonds had frayed. Sarah had tried to make plans, tried to reach out, but it always felt like an effort, as if she were forcing something that was no longer natural. It was painful to acknowledge, but it was clear that the dynamics of her relationships had shifted, and not for the better. The loneliness she felt at work was mirrored in her personal life, and that emptiness had started to feel suffocating. And then, that afternoon, everything seemed to culminate in the park. Sarah had been walking, trying to clear her mind, when the tears started. It wasn't one big event that triggered it, it was the little things, every disappointment, every small betrayal, every moment she'd let herself believe that everything was fine when it wasn't. She thought if she just kept moving, kept pretending, things would somehow get better. But they didn't. That's when the stranger appeared. It felt like fate, or maybe just coincidence. A man, perhaps in his early 50s, casually strolled by as Sarah sat there, tears streaking down her face. She barely noticed him at first, too caught up in her own emotions. But he must have sensed something, because he sat down next to her. He didn't offer any words at first, just sat there quietly, giving her the space to collect herself. His presence wasn't demanding or intrusive, it was almost as if he knew she needed someone without needing to ask. And for reasons Sarah couldn't explain, she found herself opening up at least just a little. His words weren't magical. They didn't feel like something out of a self-help book or a motivational speech. Instead, they felt raw, real, like they came from someone who had lived through pain and had learned to carry it with grace. He didn't tell her to snap out of it or stop crying. He simply said, "I've been where you are. The weight you carry isn't yours alone. We all have moments where we feel like we're drowning, but it doesn't mean we have to go under. You're stronger than you think." Those words were simple, but they hit her like a punch in the gut. The way he said them, the way he didn't try to fix her, made her feel like she wasn't alone. But just as quickly as he had appeared, the stranger stood up and began to walk away. Sarah, still processing what had just happened, felt something inside her shift. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen not for her job performance or her role as a daughter or a friend, but for the person she was underneath it all. But there was one thing Sarah couldn't ignore. The stranger had said something that didn't sit right with her. He had mentioned, almost offhandedly, that sometimes, it's the people closest to us who don't realize how far we're falling. It was a strange comment, almost as if he knew something about her life, about Jacob, her friends, and her job that she hadn't told anyone. But how could he? And why had he said that? Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more to it? As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't just a random act of kindness. It felt like a puzzle piece, but the picture wasn't complete. There was a nagging sense that the stranger knew more than he let on, that his appearance in her life wasn't by chance. Something told her that this moment, this strange, unremarkable encounter, was just the beginning of a much bigger story. And as the days passed, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, had that chance meeting in the park been a sign? Or had she just been too desperate for answers to see the bigger picture? But there was one thing she couldn't ignore, the feeling that something or someone in her life was hiding a secret. Something or someone was connected to that stranger, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized she needed to find out what. The mystery was only just beginning, and Sarah was about to learn that sometimes, the truth is buried in the places we least expect. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The stranger's words kept echoing in her mind, especially that one strange remark he'd made about how the people closest to her might not realize how far she was falling. At first, she thought it was just his way of trying to comfort her. But as the hours turned into days, the nagging feeling that he had known something more than he let on started to eat away at her. It wasn't just a random encounter, no matter how much she tried to convince herself it was. She felt an undeniable pull to uncover the truth, but the more she looked, the more she realized that the truth wasn't going to come easily. It all started innocently enough. Sarah found herself rethinking her recent interactions with her friends, her family, and even Jacob. Maybe there was something she had missed, a pattern of behavior she hadn't recognized before. She started asking around, casually bringing up the stranger's cryptic words in conversations. But each time she did, the reactions were strange. Her best friend, Emily, brushed it off as just a random encounter. "You're overthinking this, Sarah. People say things all the time, just because it sounded deep doesn't mean it was." But something in Emily's voice didn't sit right with Sarah. It was almost as if Emily was trying too hard to convince her that it wasn't important. Emily, of all people, who knew her better than anyone, seemed uncomfortable with the topic. The more Sarah thought about it, the more she realized that Emily's discomfort wasn't the only thing that stood out. Her recent conversations with Jacob had been odd as well. After their breakup, Sarah had been trying to rebuild some semblance of friendship with him, but it hadn't been easy. There was still a lot of unspoken tension, and Jacob seemed distracted, almost like he was avoiding her. Every time Sarah tried to dig a little deeper, trying to understand why their relationship had faltered, Jacob would change the subject or pull away. It wasn't the conversation Sarah was hoping for, but she didn't press him too hard. But now, the feeling that something was hidden beneath the surface began to claw at her. She decided to visit the park again, the same bench, the same spot where the stranger had spoken to her. Maybe there was something she missed, something that would help her piece it all together. When she arrived, the park was as quiet as ever, the golden glow of the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the paths. Sarah sat on the bench, her mind spinning, trying to remember every detail of that encounter. As she stared off into the distance, lost in thought, she noticed something strange on the ground, an old, crumpled piece of paper. It was partially hidden under a bench nearby, and when she picked it up, her heart skipped a beat. It looked like a note, written in hurried handwriting. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her feel like she was onto something. The note read, "The truth is closer than you think. Don't trust anyone around you. They know more than they're letting on." Her fingers trembled as she held the paper. This was it. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. Someone who knew about the stranger or perhaps even knew about her had left this note behind. The words were too specific to be a coincidence, and they sent a chill down her spine. She was close, closer than she had ever been to uncovering something that had been hidden from her. But as she folded the note and put it in her bag, a sharp voice from behind interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah." She turned to see Emily standing there, her face a mixture of concern and frustration. "What are you doing here? Are you really going to keep digging into this nonsense?" Emily's voice was tight, and the way she crossed her arms, standing stiffly, felt off. There was something in the air between them, an unspoken tension that Sarah hadn't felt before. "You need to let this go. Some things are better left in the past." Sarah's stomach twisted. Emily's words were not just an innocent warning, they felt like a threat. It was a stark contrast to her usual laid-back, supportive self. The warning in Emily's tone hit a nerve, and Sarah immediately felt a growing suspicion that there was more to her friend's words than she was letting on. Was Emily hiding something? Or was she simply trying to protect Sarah from the truth? Before Sarah could respond, Emily's phone buzzed, and she quickly glanced at the screen. Her face paled, and she immediately stuffed the phone back into her pocket. "Look, I'm just trying to look out for you. I don't think you should be involved in this anymore," she said, her voice now softer, almost pleading. "Please, Sarah. Trust me on this one." But Sarah wasn't convinced. The stranger had given her the push she needed, and now, Emily's reaction only made her more determined. She nodded curtly, not trusting her own voice, and walked away, her mind racing. What was it that Emily wasn't saying? What was she trying to protect her from? And why did she seem so anxious to end this investigation? As Sarah dug deeper, the obstacles only multiplied. A few days later, she tried to visit the park again to search for any more clues, but the note was gone. It was as if it had never existed. The bench was clean, and there was no trace of the crumpled paper she had found earlier. Her heart sank as she realized that someone, perhaps Emily, perhaps someone else, had made sure the evidence had disappeared. And that wasn't the only thing that started to unravel. Sarah also discovered that a file she had been keeping on her laptop, which contained all her notes on the investigation, had been deleted. No trace of it remained. The more Sarah tried to follow the trail, the more people seemed to warn her, to shut her down. And just when she thought she was getting closer to uncovering the truth, the walls kept closing in. Was it possible that the stranger had been right? That the people closest to her, Emily, Jacob, knew more than they were letting on? The breaking point came one night when Sarah received a cryptic message on her phone. It was a video, but there was no name attached, just a short text: "Stop digging. You don't know what you're getting into." When Sarah clicked on the video, her breath caught in her throat. It was a recording of a conversation between Jacob and Emily, talking about her. The two of them were discussing her in hushed voices, unaware that they were being recorded. The message was clear: they knew something about Sarah, something they were keeping from her. The video cut off abruptly, and as Sarah sat frozen, staring at her screen, her mind was racing. What were they hiding? Why did they feel the need to warn her off? Now, more than ever, Sarah knew she was in the middle of something bigger than she could have imagined. Every lead she followed only seemed to push her deeper into a web of secrets. And just when she thought she had uncovered the truth, she realized that the answers she was seeking might be more dangerous than she ever could have anticipated. The question now wasn't just about what happened in the past, it was about what was going to happen next. Was Sarah really ready to face the truth, no matter how dark it might be? Or would she be forced to walk away before it consumed her? The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined, and as the days wore on, the mystery only deepened. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in, not just on her investigation, but on her entire sense of reality. The video, the cryptic message, and the disappearance of the evidence, it all felt too orchestrated, like someone was actively working to keep her from the truth. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wasn't the only one who was being affected. There was someone else, someone who was close to her, someone she trusted, who seemed to be caught up in this web of secrecy and lies. And that someone was Emily. Sarah had always thought of Emily as her rock, her confidant, the person who knew her better than anyone else. But now, the cracks were starting to show. Emily's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and Sarah couldn't ignore the feeling that her best friend was hiding something far darker than she had initially realized. It all started when Sarah received another message, this time not on her phone, but in the form of an email. It was from Emily. The subject line read, "We need to talk. It's not what you think." Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she opened the message, her hands trembling. The email was brief, almost too brief, and it made her stomach churn. Emily apologized for her previous behavior and pleaded with Sarah to stop digging into the past. She claimed that the things Sarah was uncovering could ruin everything they had worked for, everything they had been through together. And then, at the end of the email, there was a sentence that stopped Sarah cold: "I wish you hadn't found out. It's too late now." What did that mean? What had Sarah found out? She didn't have the answers, and the more she thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fall apart. Emily's words didn't add up. Why would she be so desperate to stop Sarah from continuing the investigation? What was so important that Emily couldn't afford for Sarah to uncover it? And why had Emily sent her that message? Was it a warning, a confession, or something else entirely? The fact that Emily had written those words with such urgency sent a ripple of fear through Sarah. She had been told to stop before, but this time felt different. There was something else at play, something far more sinister than Sarah could have imagined. But the twists didn't stop there. The following day, Sarah met up with her brother, Tom, for lunch. She hadn't seen him in a few weeks, and their conversation had been light and casual at first, but as the meal went on, Sarah found herself slipping into the topic she couldn't let go of: the stranger, the note, the strange behavior of her closest friends. Tom listened patiently, nodding along, but when she mentioned Emily's strange email, Tom's face changed. It was subtle, just a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but Sarah caught it. He quickly looked away and pretended not to notice. "I don't know, Sarah. Maybe you're just overthinking it," he said, his tone dismissive. "Emily's always been a bit intense. You know how she gets." But something about Tom's response didn't sit right with Sarah. She knew her brother, and he wasn't the type to shrug things off like that. Tom had always been protective of her, and the way he avoided eye contact when Emily's name came up was enough to raise her suspicions. Was he hiding something, too? Had he been involved in whatever secret Emily was trying to keep from Sarah? And if so, what role did he play in all of this? Sarah's mind raced as she left the restaurant, her gut telling her that Tom's strange reaction was no coincidence. She was starting to wonder just how deep this rabbit hole went and how many people in her life were connected to whatever was happening. But then, just when Sarah thought things couldn't get any more complicated, a new piece of evidence surfaced. She had been going through her old emails, trying to piece together anything that might help her connect the dots, when one particular thread caught her eye. It was an old email from her work, nothing too important at first glance, just a routine message about an upcoming meeting. But something about it felt off. She opened it up, reading through the contents, when she noticed something peculiar in the signature, a phone number that she didn't recognize. It was odd, because Sarah had never received any official communication with that number, and it wasn't a part of any contact list she had. The number looked innocuous enough at first, just a regular string of digits, but then Sarah realized something chilling. The area code was for a city, one that she had no personal connections to, but that had come up in a previous conversation with the stranger in the park. Could it be that the stranger had been connected to something bigger than just a random encounter? Or was it possible that this phone number, this connection, was something that tied her work, her friends, and even her family into a larger conspiracy? With her heart pounding in her chest, Sarah immediately dialed the number, her fingers trembling. The phone rang once, twice, and just as she was about to hang up, someone picked up. "Hello?" A voice on the other end of the line answered, but it wasn't a voice Sarah recognized. It was calm, methodical, almost rehearsed. Before Sarah could say anything, the voice spoke again, this time with a sharp edge. "You've been asking the wrong questions, Sarah. You need to stop. The more you dig, the more you'll lose." The call ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in disbelief. Her mind raced as the realization hit her: someone was actively trying to silence her. This wasn't just about her personal life anymore. It was about something bigger, something that stretched beyond her relationships with Jacob, Emily, or even Tom. The stakes had just escalated in a way she couldn't ignore. Whoever had made that phone call knew exactly what she was doing, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to stop her from uncovering the truth. But the more Sarah thought about it, the more she realized that the deeper she went, the more she was being dragged into a labyrinth of lies and secrets that no one, least of all herself, could fully understand. As she sat in the quiet of her apartment, her mind spinning with confusion and fear, Sarah knew that she couldn't stop now. But the question lingered: who could she trust? Was Emily involved in something darker than Sarah had ever imagined? Was Tom hiding a past that connected him to the very mystery Sarah was trying to unravel? And who had been behind that cryptic phone call? As the pieces of the puzzle scattered around her, Sarah realized that the truth was slipping further and further out of her reach, and with every step she took, the danger was closing in. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that she was caught in something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. And the worst part? She had no idea who to trust anymore. The days that followed that chilling phone call felt like an endless blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. Every shadow seemed like it was hiding something, every face in the crowd felt too familiar, like someone was watching her from the edges of her vision. Sarah could no longer shake the feeling that she was being followed. It wasn't just a passing thought anymore, it was a constant presence in the back of her mind, gnawing at her every time she stepped outside her apartment, every time she walked down the street. At first, she told herself she was overreacting. Everyone gets paranoid when they're deep in a mystery, right? But the more she noticed the subtle signs, the more she realized she wasn't just imagining it. It started small. A man in a dark jacket who seemed to be walking just a few paces behind her whenever she went out. At first, it was a coincidence. She thought maybe it was just someone heading in the same direction. But then, it started happening more frequently, in different places. The man would always be there, just close enough for her to notice but never close enough to be sure he was following her. He would appear outside her office, standing near the bus stop when she walked home, lurking in the background of her evening walks in the park. And every time she turned a corner or glanced back, he would disappear. But it wasn't just that. There were the strange cars that would pass by her building when she was coming home at night, cars that weren't familiar, cars that didn't belong. It was as though someone was keeping a close eye on her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that right moment, Sarah felt in her gut, was coming soon. One night, after yet another sleepless evening spent scrolling through her emails, rereading the cryptic messages from Emily, Jacob, and even that stranger in the park, Sarah decided to confront Emily. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The distance between them was growing, and Sarah knew that the secrets Emily was hiding were more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She texted Emily, asking to meet up at the usual coffee shop they frequented. Emily's reply came almost immediately, too quickly, with a terse, "I'm busy tonight. Can we talk tomorrow?" Sarah's instinct told her something was wrong. Emily had always been open with her, always made time. This sudden change in behavior was the final nudge she needed. She left her apartment in a hurry, determined to confront her friend. As she walked toward the coffee shop, her heart started pounding in her chest. She felt that same unsettling feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she passed the usual street corner, where she had always felt safe, familiar. But tonight, everything was different. She stopped and looked around, her eyes scanning the street. That's when she saw him. The man in the dark jacket. He was standing across the street, barely visible in the shadows, but Sarah knew it was him. Her pulse quickened, and her breath caught in her throat. He was still following her. She turned down another street in a panic, hoping to lose him in the maze of alleyways. But the footsteps, steady and measured, followed her every move. This time, there was no doubt in her mind. She was being followed, and it wasn't just a coincidence. This was something more. She ran, weaving through side streets, her heart pounding, her mind racing with the overwhelming fear that she was about to lose control. But the footsteps grew louder, closer. They weren't going to let her get away. She rounded a corner sharply, looking over her shoulder, and that's when she saw it. A black car idling at the end of the street, its engine running quietly, its headlights off. Sarah's stomach dropped. It was too deliberate, too calculated. She was trapped. Just as she was about to take a breath, to try to calm her mind and think, a figure emerged from the darkness. It wasn't the man in the jacket, but the figure was tall, hooded, and blocking the path ahead of her. She froze, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The figure didn't say anything, but there was a sense of finality in the air. A chill that ran deeper than the cold night. Sarah's eyes flicked to the car again. The door opened slowly, and another man stepped out, someone she recognized but never thought she would see again. It was Tom. Her brother. But he didn't look like the same person. His face was hard, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen. There was something in his gaze, something distant and calculating, that made her heart stop. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have dug this deep." His words were calm, almost reassuring, like he was speaking to someone who didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But Sarah understood. He knew something about all of this. He was part of it. Tom, what's going on? Sarah's voice trembled as she tried to keep the panic at bay. What's happening? Why is all of this happening? But before he could answer, the man in the dark jacket stepped closer, his face now illuminated by the streetlights. It was a man Sarah didn't recognize at all, but there was something about his presence, something about the way he moved, that sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't just some random guy who happened to be following her. This man, this entire situation, was far more dangerous than she had imagined. The figure in front of her stepped back slightly, just enough to let her see the tension in the air. It was thick, suffocating. Tom looked at her, his expression unreadable. You need to go home, Sarah. Forget about everything. This isn't your fight. You can't stop me, Sarah found herself saying, though the words felt foreign. How much had she already uncovered? Had she walked into something so deep that there was no way out? The truth was just beyond her reach, but the price of getting there was quickly becoming clear. Tom's face tightened. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you anymore. It's too late. He turned toward the car, his voice lowering. Take care of it. Without warning, the man in the jacket lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. The world seemed to tilt as he pulled her toward the car. Her breath caught in her throat, her mind racing to make sense of what was happening. Was this it? Was this where it all ended? But then something snapped inside her. Panic surged through her chest, and she twisted her body, jerking away from the grip. She shoved with all her might, her pulse pounding in her ears, and managed to break free for a split second. She ran, not knowing where, just away. The sound of footsteps pounding behind her told her that she wasn't going to make it far. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Sarah didn't know how far she ran, or how long it took for her to lose the shadow behind her, but when she finally slowed to a stop, the city felt eerily silent. She was alone, breathless, trembling, with no idea who she could trust anymore. The truth, the mystery, everything that had been unraveling, it was no longer just an investigation. It was her life on the line. Her mind was reeling, too many questions spinning in her head, but one truth was clear: the deeper she went, the more danger she put herself in. And as she stood there, alone in the dark, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Was anyone safe anymore? Was it already too late to stop? The truth was slipping further out of reach, and Sarah realized, with a sickening clarity, that the darkness surrounding her might have been hiding more than just a mystery. It might have been a trap all along. Sarah sat on the curb, her head in her hands, trying to steady her breathing after the chaotic night. The city lights blurred around her, the sounds of the street a distant hum that she could barely focus on. Everything she had believed, everything she had thought she knew, had just been thrown into question. She was no longer sure who was on her side, or even if there was anyone left who could be trusted. She thought she had been uncovering the truth, piecing together fragments of a conspiracy that stretched through her closest relationships. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. What if everything she'd been chasing was a lie? What if she'd been manipulated from the start? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. A text from Emily. Her stomach twisted as she read the message. I didn't want you to find out this way. Meet me. You'll understand everything. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She was hesitant to meet Emily after everything that had happened. She couldn't shake the feeling that Emily had been hiding something. But the message felt different. There was an urgency to it, a tone she hadn't heard before. Emily wanted to explain. But explain what? Everything Sarah had learned up until now pointed to Emily being involved in something much darker than she could have imagined. And yet, what if it wasn't Emily? The thought hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. What if someone had been manipulating her this entire time, using her emotions and relationships to get to the truth? What if the real story was something completely different? She had no answers, only a rising sense of dread as she made her way to the meeting spot. A small park by the edge of the city, the same one where everything had started. The place felt eerie now, like it was filled with ghosts from her past, whispering secrets that she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. When she arrived, there was no sign of Emily. She looked around, her breath fogging in the cold air, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, As if the shadows themselves parted, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. It wasn't Emily. It was Jacob. Sarah froze. The last person she had expected to see. The man who had been kind to her, who had helped her during the roughest times, was standing there, his face grim, eyes dark with something she couldn't place. He stepped forward, his gaze intense, almost desperate. "Sarah, you need to listen to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I should have told you this earlier, but it was too dangerous. You were too close." Sarah's mind spun. Dangerous? Too close? What was he talking about? "What are you talking about, Jacob?" she asked, trying to steady her breath, but the words felt hollow in her mouth. Every instinct told her to run, to get away from him, but her legs were frozen to the spot. Jacob looked over his shoulder, like he was checking for anyone nearby. "I didn't want this to happen. But you've been following the wrong trail." His voice cracked, and Sarah's confusion deepened. "You've been following a lie." He stepped closer, his hands reaching out to her, as if pleading. "The real story is much darker than you think. Emily wasn't the one behind all of this. It wasn't her. It was me. I was trying to protect you." Sarah shook her head, her mind struggling to catch up. "What do you mean? How could you? You've been helping me this whole time." Jacob's eyes softened for a brief moment, a flash of regret in his expression before he quickly masked it. "That's what I wanted you to think. I never wanted you to get tangled up in this mess, but it's too late now. You're in deeper than you realize." He stepped back slightly, like he was weighing his words, then looked straight into her eyes. "You've been chasing the wrong leads because of the people you trust. But the truth? It's not about Emily, or Tom, or even the stranger in the park. It's about me. It's always been about me." Sarah's head was spinning. Her vision blurred for a moment as the weight of his words sank in. What was he saying? Had she been wrong this whole time? Was Jacob really behind all of this? "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking with the effort to process what was happening. "Why would you do this? Why would you lie to me?" Jacob looked away, guilt etched into his features. "Because I was protecting you from the truth. From the real truth. But now, you've found too much. They're coming for you, Sarah. And I can't protect you anymore." The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. "They're coming for you." She'd heard that phrase before, but it had never carried this much weight. The sudden realization dawned on her: there had been a reason people had been warning her. A reason Emily had been so desperate for her to stop. A reason Tom had acted so distant, and why that stranger in the park had appeared out of nowhere. She wasn't just chasing a mystery. She had stumbled into something far bigger, something that involved people who were far closer to her than she could have ever imagined. "You're not the only one," Jacob continued, his voice raw. "There's a group, Sarah. A secret group, and they've been pulling the strings all along. They've been watching you, and now you've seen too much. They'll stop at nothing to make sure you never uncover the rest of it." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She had thought she was the one investigating, the one uncovering the truth, but now it seemed like the whole game had been played from the start. And Jacob was at the center of it all. "But what does that mean for me?" she asked, barely able to find her voice. "What happens now?" Jacob's face darkened. "You're a part of this now, Sarah. You've been marked. They won't stop until you're either on their side, or out of the picture for good." The cold weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. There was no turning back now. The truth she had been chasing wasn't just about answers. It was about survival. As the park grew eerily quiet around them, Sarah's mind raced, but it was as if the pieces of the puzzle were slipping away from her grasp. Everything she had known, everything she had believed, was unraveling before her eyes. And in the silence that followed, one undeniable truth echoed in her head: she was not in control of this anymore. The weight of Jacob's words hung in the air, suffocating Sarah with the unbearable realization that everything she thought she knew was a lie. She had always believed that her pursuit of the truth, no matter how dangerous or difficult, would bring clarity, would lead her to answers. But now, the lines between right and wrong, trust and betrayal, had blurred beyond recognition. Jacob had made it clear: there was no turning back. She wasn't just a victim in someone else's game, She was a player now, a pawn in a far more dangerous scheme than she ever could have imagined. But the question gnawed at her: what was she supposed to do now? As Sarah stood there in the empty park, her mind raced, but her body felt numb. Her first instinct was to run, to escape from everything. She wanted to go home, lock herself away, and forget this whole nightmare. But the truth was, she couldn't escape anymore. It was like the walls were closing in, suffocating her at every turn. Everywhere she looked, there was a new threat, a new danger lurking in the shadows. Every person she trusted seemed to be connected to a far darker plot. Emily, Tom, Jacob, could she believe any of them now? They had all played their parts, manipulated her emotions, her choices. And now she had to choose who to trust. The sharp ring of her phone cut through the silence, sending a jolt through her chest. Sarah didn't even need to check the caller ID, she already knew who it was. Emily's name flashed across the screen, and for a long moment, she just stared at it, unwilling to pick up. What could Emily possibly have to say? The girl who had been hiding secrets from her, who had been part of the web that was tightening around Sarah's life. The girl who had been a friend, yet might have known far more than she let on. But then, as if she could feel the pull of fate, Sarah's trembling finger hovered over the green button, and she answered the call. Sarah. I know you're angry, but you need to listen to me. This is bigger than both of us. Emily's voice was shaky, as though she had been crying, or maybe just terrified. Sarah's chest tightened. It was hard to separate the emotions she felt for Emily, the betrayal and the lingering affection. They had been friends for so long, but now Emily was tangled up in something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. I'm listening, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice even, but she could hear the edge in her tone, the frustration, the fear. What the hell is going on, Emily? What do you want from me? There was a long pause on the other end, and then Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way. But it's too late. They know you're digging. They know everything. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, they? She felt like she was falling into a trap, but there was no way out. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to question everything, but she couldn't ignore the sense of urgency in Emily's voice. It was as if Emily was warning her, like she was caught in the same tangled web, trapped just like Sarah. I don't have much time, Emily continued. The people who've been following you, they're connected to the group I've been trying to protect you from. I know you're angry, but you need to understand, I never meant for this to happen. It's bigger than just us. I'm so sorry, Sarah, but if you keep pushing forward, they'll... The call suddenly cut off. No warning, no sign, just silence. Sarah's heart raced, her stomach sinking as she stared at the phone, desperately trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was Emily trying to say? And why was she apologizing? Something felt off, something wasn't right. Before she could think it through, her phone buzzed again, this time with a new message. It was from Tom. Meet me at the old diner. You'll understand everything. The old diner. The place where they used to hang out in high school. It seemed so nostalgic. But this wasn't the time for nostalgia. This wasn't about the past anymore, it was about survival. The choice was impossible. Go to the diner and face Tom, the one person who seemed to be on her side but who had been hiding something from her for far too long. Or trust Emily, even though she had been mixed up in all of this. Both options seemed equally dangerous. Either path led her straight into the heart of the storm, where no one was safe. How had everything gotten so out of control? She stood there in the park for what felt like hours, her mind spinning as she weighed her options. What if Tom was part of the group Jacob mentioned? What if he was just using her as a pawn, too, to cover up his own involvement? She had trusted him once, but how could she trust anyone now? Emily had been lying to her, and Jacob had just admitted to being part of the deception. And now, Tom wanted to meet. She didn't know if she could handle any more secrets, any more lies. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong. That whatever Tom had to say would either clear everything up or change everything once again. The decision was ripping her apart. She didn't know who to trust, or if anyone was truly on her side. And in that moment, as the chilly wind whipped through the empty streets, Sarah realized just how alone she truly was. It wasn't just the people around her she had to worry about anymore. It was herself. Her choices were being forced upon her, and with every step she took, the ground beneath her seemed to slip further out of reach. There was no going back. She had to choose, but no matter which path she took, she felt the walls closing in. Every decision felt like it could be her last. And just as she made up her mind, a shadow crossed her path. A familiar face. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone she never expected to see again. "Sarah, it's not what you think," the voice whispered from the shadows, just as the streetlights flickered out. And in that moment, Sarah realized nothing was what it seemed. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped into the old diner, the familiar smell of greasy food and stale coffee filling the air. The flickering neon sign outside barely illuminated the darkened interior. It had been years since she'd set foot in this place, and yet, the memories rushed back as though no time had passed. She could feel her pulse pounding in her throat as she made her way to the back booth, the one where she and Tom had spent countless hours talking about their lives, their hopes, their futures, before everything had turned into this nightmare. But now, as she slid into the booth, the weight of every decision she had made, every step she had taken, pressed down on her like 1,000 tons of stone. The world felt off balance. Everything she had believed in, the people she had trusted, had been turned upside down. Tom wasn't who she thought he was. Emily wasn't who she thought she was. And Jacob's betrayal had only scratched the surface of a much deeper, darker reality. She glanced around the diner, looking for him. There was no sign of Tom, but there was a strange feeling in the air, like the walls themselves were closing in. The door opened with a creak, and Sarah's eyes snapped toward the figure stepping inside. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't Tom. It was someone else. Someone she hadn't seen in years. A woman with sharp, calculating eyes. A woman who had once been a close friend, someone Sarah had considered a sister. Vanessa. Vanessa's lips curled into a cold smile as she made her way toward the booth. Sarah's stomach twisted. The shock of seeing her here, after everything, left her momentarily speechless. Vanessa had been involved, she had to be. And yet, Sarah had never suspected her. She had never seen the signs. "You've been digging, Sarah," Vanessa said, her voice smooth and almost too calm. "You really shouldn't have." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite herself. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Vanessa slid into the booth opposite her, her eyes narrowing. "It's all part of the plan, Sarah. All of it. The people you've been chasing, Tom, Emily, Jacob, they're all pawns, just like you." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Her mind raced, trying to process what Vanessa was saying, but the words didn't make sense. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No. You're lying. You're all lying. You can't be part of this. You're not." Vanessa leaned forward, cutting her off. "Sarah, you have no idea just how deep this goes. It's not just a handful of people. It's not just a group of friends, or some strange conspiracy. You've been part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. This isn't about us. This is about them." "Them?" Sarah echoed, barely able to breathe. Vanessa nodded slowly, her smile tight. "The organization. The people pulling the strings. You thought you were investigating a mystery, but in reality, you were being used from the very beginning. Every person you've trusted, every step you've taken, has been orchestrated." Sarah shook her head, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what Vanessa was saying. "No, I don't believe you," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and rising anger. "You're just trying to mess with my head." Vanessa sighed, her gaze darkening. "You really don't get it, do you? You thought you were uncovering secrets, but the truth is, you've been chasing your own tail. This was never about finding the truth. It was always about making sure you didn't get too close to it. And now, well, now it's too late." Before Sarah could respond, Vanessa's phone buzzed on the table, the sound sharp and jarring. Vanessa glanced down at it, her expression unreadable. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone and reading the message. Her eyes flickered up to meet Sarah's, and for the first time, Sarah saw a glimmer of something, fear. Sarah, Vanessa said, her voice quieter now, almost too calm. They know you're here. They've known about you the whole time. A cold rush of panic surged through Sarah. What do you mean? She gasped, feeling the walls of the diner closing in on her. The feeling of being watched, hunted, was suffocating. Who? Who knows? Vanessa's fingers tightened around her phone as she met Sarah's gaze. Everyone. Everyone you've spoken to. Every person you've trusted. They're all connected. And now, it's not just about you anymore. It's about what they'll do to make sure this ends. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She could hardly breathe, her vision swimming. You're telling me that everyone? Everyone I've talked to, or trusted, or everyone, Sarah, Vanessa said softly, but there was no warmth in her voice. And you're not just in danger anymore. They've already made their move. This is about control, about power, about keeping the truth buried. And you, she paused, looking at Sarah with pity, you're the last person standing in their way. As if on cue, the door to the diner slammed open, and a tall man with a cold, steely expression stepped inside. He was dressed in all black, his eyes scanning the room with a military precision. It was a look Sarah had seen before, on Jacob. On Tom. And now, him. This man wasn't just anyone. He was them. Vanessa, the man said with a chilling calmness that made Sarah's blood run cold. It's time. Vanessa nodded, standing up from the booth. It's done, she said, her voice icy. She's not going to make it out of here. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She was trapped, cornered. She had been played from the start, her every move manipulated, every person she trusted turned into a weapon used against her. The conspiracy wasn't just about her. It wasn't just a small group. It was everywhere. And now, the moment had arrived, the moment where everything would change. There was no way out. Sarah didn't have time to think. The man advanced toward her with deliberate steps, and the weight of the truth crashed over her all at once. This was bigger than just the people around her. This was a war, a fight for power that would take down everyone in its path, and she was the final piece. The air in the dimly lit room was thick with tension, the silence deafening as Sarah stood frozen, staring at the man in front of her. The stranger, the one who had walked into the diner just moments ago, was no longer a faceless threat. She knew who he was now. She had seen the name, heard the whispers, pieced together the fragments from conversations, messages, and the half-truths that had been thrown her way. His name was Victor Mallory, a name that had been connected to everything she had uncovered, everything she had feared, and yet never fully understood. He was the mastermind, the puppet master behind the entire web of lies, and now, standing just a few feet away from him, Sarah could feel the weight of his presence like a crushing force. You've done well to get this far, Sarah. Victor's voice was smooth, but there was no warmth in it, just a cold, calculating tone that sent a shiver down her spine. But you've made one crucial mistake. You've gotten too close to the truth. His eyes, dark and piercing, never left hers. And that's the part one can't let you walk away from. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, but she refused to back down. She had come too far to let fear control her now. Every step, every twist, every betrayal had led her here, to this confrontation, to the moment where everything would finally come to light. The conspiracy, the people she thought she could trust, the mysterious messages, and the cryptic warnings, it had all been part of a grand design. A design she was just beginning to understand. But now, with Victor standing before her, she knew that nothing she had uncovered so far had prepared her for this final revelation. You think you're the only one who's been playing this game, don't you? Sarah's voice was low, but the fury in it was unmistakable. You think you've controlled everything, manipulated everyone, but you're wrong. I'm not going to let you win. Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and contempt. Win? My dear, you've never even understood the game. You're just a piece, like all the others. A pawn. I gave you just enough to keep you moving forward, to make you think you were the one pulling the strings. But in the end, you're not in control. You never were. Sarah's mind was racing, connecting the final dots. It was all starting to make sense, the fragmented pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. But there was one last piece she needed, one last clue that would expose Victor's true intentions. She remembered the photo, she had seen it earlier, buried in the stack of files she had found in Emily's apartment. It was a photo of Victor, standing with Jacob, Tom, and someone else, someone Sarah hadn't recognized at first. But now she understood. The missing piece, the one person who had remained a shadow in her investigation, was Victor's partner in crime, someone she trusted more than anyone. Tom, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, but the words hit Victor like a shockwave. Tom's in on this, isn't he? You've been using him all along. Victor's smile faltered for just a moment, and that brief crack in his composed exterior gave Sarah the strength she needed to keep going. He was the perfect ally, Victor said, his voice now tinged with irritation. A willing participant in the beginning. But even he didn't understand the full scope of what we're doing here. It wasn't just about power. It was about control. About creating a new order. A new order. The words echoed in Sarah's mind, and for a moment, she felt the floor beneath her feet shift, the entire world tilting as the weight of Victor's plan settled in. This wasn't just a conspiracy. It wasn't just a group of corrupt individuals trying to get away with a crime. This was something far darker, something that reached far beyond the people she had trusted. This was about creating an empire, one built on secrecy, manipulation, and total control. And Sarah had become the key to unlocking it. You've been pulling the strings behind the scenes, Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disgust. But you never counted on me. You never thought I would get this far. Victor's gaze darkened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. You think you're special, don't you? You think you're the hero in this story. But this is the way the world works. People like you, you're just pawns, Sarah. You always have been. You were never meant to uncover the truth. You were meant to follow it. And now, your little investigation ends here. Suddenly, the room seemed to close in around her. The walls felt like they were pressing down, and Sarah could almost feel the weight of her choices, the consequences of what had brought her to this moment. She had come too far, uncovered too much, to just walk away now. There was no turning back. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing the edges of the small, tattered envelope she had found earlier, the final piece of evidence that would change everything. She didn't know what it meant at first, but now she saw it clearly. It was the key. The one thing that would expose Victor's entire operation. With trembling hands, she tore the envelope open, her eyes scanning the document inside. Her breath caught in her throat as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. The name on the paper. The name she had never expected to see. Her father's name. Her father, who had disappeared years ago under mysterious circumstances. The man who had been involved in something far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. The man who had been working with Victor and the rest of them all along. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at Victor, her eyes wide with realization. You knew, she whispered, her voice shaking. You knew who I was all along. You knew I'd be the one to figure it out. Victor's expression remained cold, his face unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something dark, something triumphant. You were always meant to find out, Sarah. That's the beauty of it. You've been playing your part perfectly. And just as she thought she understood the full scope of the plan, the final twist hit her like a wave, crashing over everything she thought she knew. A loud click echoed in the room, and Sarah's stomach dropped. She turned to see Tom, standing in the doorway, his face expressionless, a gun in his hand. The betrayal was too much. Her mind couldn't process it. Tom, the one person who had been there for her, the one she had trusted more than anyone. He wasn't just part of this, it was all part of his plan, too. You didn't think I was going to let you ruin everything, did you? Tom's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. This is bigger than both of us. And now, it's over. The world tilted again, and in that final, horrific moment, Sarah understood the full depth of the conspiracy. She had been a pawn in a game she never even knew was being played. And now, there was no way out. The question wasn't whether she would survive this, it was how much of herself she would have to sacrifice to stop them all. Sarah's breath was shallow as she stood in the aftermath of everything that had happened, her mind racing to process the impossible reality unfolding before her. The gun that Tom had aimed at her moments ago was now lying discarded on the ground, its threat hanging in the air like an oppressive weight. She could feel her pulse thudding in her temples, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but the noise of her thoughts, the relentless questions, the betrayals, the crushing weight of the truth, was louder than anything. She had barely managed to escape with her life. The fight, the chase, the endless running had all come to a head. It had been a battle of wills, of trust, of survival. But now, in the eerie silence that followed the confrontation, Sarah was left alone with the wreckage of everything she had known, everything she thought she could trust. She had fought for answers, for justice, but the cost had been far higher than she ever imagined. Victor was gone, his empire crumbling as the evidence she had uncovered slowly made its way to the authorities. Tom, her once trusted ally, had vanished into the shadows, his face a distant memory. The web of lies and deceit that had entangled her life was slowly unraveling, piece by piece, as she stood amidst the ruins. The police had arrived too late, but they had enough now to piece together the puzzle. But that didn't stop the questions from haunting her. What had driven Tom to betray her? What was her father's true role in all of this? Was there anyone left who could be trusted? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what had this all been for? As Sarah made her way out of the dimly lit warehouse where everything had taken place, the cool night air hit her face, grounding her for the first time in what felt like forever. The city around her buzzed with life, oblivious to the war she had fought just blocks away. She couldn't help but feel a disconnect, like she was looking at the world through a glass wall, separated from everything she had once known. The night was quiet now, but in her mind, it was anything but. She had seen too much. She had learned too much. There was no going back to the way things had been. The realization hit her, everything in her life had changed. She had lost friends, family, pieces of herself. But she had also found something. Strength. Truth. A sense of closure, even if it wasn't the kind she had imagined. She knew there was a part of her that would never be the same. That night would always be with her, the faces of those she had trusted, their lies, their manipulation. But there was something else too, something that kept gnawing at her mind. That final conversation with Tom echoed in her thoughts. "It's over," he had said. And maybe, in a sense, it was. But part of her refused to believe it. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The conspiracy she had uncovered was just the surface, and there were still dark corners of the truth left to explore. Who else was out there? What else had been hidden? As Sarah stood there, gazing out at the city, she felt the weight of the truth she had uncovered. It was heavy, but it was also freeing. She had faced the darkest parts of herself and the world, and now she was standing on the other side. The path ahead wasn't clear, and there was still so much left unanswered, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of something close to peace. Her life wouldn't ever be simple again, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was better this way. Because she knew, deep down, that the answers were never as important as the questions. The journey itself had changed her in ways she could never fully explain. But just as she turned to leave, the faintest whisper of a sound caught her attention, soft, almost imperceptible. It came from behind her, from the shadows of the alley where the streetlights didn't quite reach. A figure stepped forward, their face obscured by the darkness, but Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to see their face to know who it was. The familiar silhouette, the unmistakable presence, it could only be one person. And in that moment, her blood ran cold. There, standing just feet away, was someone who shouldn't have been alive. Someone she thought she'd left behind. It was Jacob. His eyes met hers, full of meaning, full of secrets. "You thought it was over," he said, his voice low, but there was a trace of something else in it, something she couldn't quite place. "But it's not." Sarah's stomach twisted in a knot. Her mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. The world seemed to tilt, the ground beneath her feet suddenly unstable as she tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. Was this another game? Another layer of deception? Had she really uncovered the truth, or was there more, something darker and deeper than she had ever imagined? As the last of the streetlights flickered above her, Sarah stood there, caught in the moment between everything she had known and everything she would never understand. She had uncovered so many secrets, But now she realized there were more left in the shadows. And as Jacob stepped forward, his face still hidden, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over. It would never truly be over. And as the credits rolled, the audience was left with a chilling thought. Sometimes, the darkest truths are the ones we're never meant to find.